You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our V.A.C Roundtable number 69. We are getting ready. It's the new year, and as things get ready in the new year, one of the things people are working on is growing. And of course, with the growing season coming upon us, people are getting their soils ready, and we are very excited to be joined by Ian Ardoin, and he comes to us basically as a living soil guy. And so as we look towards prepping and getting ready towards the growing season, we feel that good, healthy living soil is a great way to, self-medicate with your medicine by growing it in a healthy environment. You get expressions from growing outdoor that you do not get indoors, and especially in growing in living soil versus hydroponics. You get unique expressions, terpenes, unique terpene mixes and blends, some that have been found to be extinct even, but thanks to living soil and giving the plants its best possible ability to grow is what our guest specializes in. So Ian, thank you for joining us today for this discussion, for most importantly to help our veterans understand, people of course love their cannabis, but they don't necessarily understand how it's grown. And how it's grown, as we know, for every grower there's a different way to grow. But thanks to generational growers and others, and permaculture, and looking at ways to sustain your local agriculture, living soil is something that has popped up again in the past few years with cannabis coming online. So let's get into our discussion outright. The first question, Ian, is kind of a multi-pronged one, but it is, how did you originally come to cannabis? How did you hear about it? When were you aware of it? How did you get turned on to it? Welcome.
Yeah. So this one's interesting. It's a two-part thing, I guess. I was quite young, it was, I was 9-10 years old, and there's really no other excuse or explanation for someone that young using cannabis and anything else I was using at that time. But that was my introduction. It was, amongst other things, just a form of escape was that reality at that time, and I was obviously very young, didn't understand a lot of things, but that was the introduction. Through high school, got away from it, but having been around it earlier, getting into jobs, getting out of high school, it was something I came back to, and just really enjoyed the feeling of that it made me feel, getting high. It was great. And I noticed that it calmed my mind and helped me sleep, was the one lasting reason for me that kept it around. Just insomnia always plagued me, thinking too much at night, not being able to fall asleep. So that was huge for me. And it yeah, that was the intro. It's just being young and dumb and exploring.
Right. Well, it's
Yeah.
we all find our way to this plant in our own unique paths. So,
It,
that's
yep.
a
The
unique thing.
universe works in interesting ways, and here we are.
Right on. Well, we'll start off. We'll get into it with Councilmember Nate Landau. Councilmember Landau with our next question.
Hey,
Ian,
Nate.
first of all, thank you so much for being here. I owe you so much thanks. You are the inspiration of why we do Living Soil. So just thank you so much for all you do. My question is, what was the driving catalyst that made you choose this as your life direction, the direction in life? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Nate. I really appreciate it. And that's kind of the second half of the first question of what brought me to cannabis, and then what was my driving force behind it was, again, I was out of the home on my own, graduated high school at 17. First into my early 20s, I was in jobs. I was washing dishes, unloading trucks, stuff that was really unfulfilling for me, didn't provide passion in life. And I remember now, I was thinking about this question earlier. I moved into my first home, right? Like actual house that has a yard and stuff. So I had to like mow the lawn, and then space to plant plants, rather than like apartments and stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's something. It brought me back to being a child, and that's something I remembered with my mom was gardening. She always gardened. She always had a garden. So that brought together my love for cannabis, and then growing up gardening, and the thought of like, what, I've been around cannabis a while, I've bought and sold a lot of weed, so maybe I can grow it now. That was the first time I connected growing cannabis with something I could maybe do for a living, because it became important to me realizing that there is something to finding joy in what we do each and every day, so I got online and scoured the internet for everything I could about growing cannabis, and put everything together I could into it. Got a little tent and a light, some seeds from, at that time it was like Canada or the Netherlands, right? You couldn't really order them here. And started growing and started experimenting. But the drive to do something day to day that I found joy in was really the driving force behind that.
Well, that's a beautiful force that grabbed a hold of you, because it's definitely.
Yeah, the plant's owned me ever since.
Now, do we own them or do they own us? That's more of the question.
Exactly, that's the thing, We're
they perpetuate us to perpetuate them, so it's kind of beautiful, symbiotic in that relationship.
Exactly.
And it also, it's the harmony of life, and also I'm here in Berkeley, and of course Berkeley was one of the earlier adopters of sustainable restaurants, finding things grown locally and produced
right
locally, healthily, so it's key that people do not forget where they are and the amazing nature that is around them. Councilmember Lester has a follow-up.
Yeah, first of all, thank you again for joining us. I'm really looking
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, it's muted, I think.
Wade, you cut out. You cut out on us. We can't hear you. We heard you initially. Can't hear you.
Muted on accident.
You might have pulled the cord out, maybe. Partly.
Yeah. Minor technical glitch.
Does that work now?
There you go.
All right. I'm working with a new device here. I love the idea that you sort of explored this idea and started off growing in a tent. What drove you to start exploring living soil? And I know this is something we're going to talk a lot about, but I know in my own work, at the very beginning, it was Rockwool cubes and general hydroponics 3-part mix. come a long way since then. Would love to hear about your evolution there. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's so having a history of, just part of my childhood, gardening outside with my mom, nothing you really think about too much. You take care of the soil, add compost, water it. There's the thought of science, the science of growing was not there. The thought of enhancing terpenes or potency, nothing was there. It was just use compost, make good soil, water it, and you're going to grow good veggies, right? So that was in the back of my mind as a really basic concept of gardening, and then specifically organic gardening, right? Because as I grew up in the 80s, early 90s, and that was really about the time when all of a sudden the word organic started to mean something. I remember when there was no fruits or veggies in the store were organic or conventional, right? But it started to become a thing. So, but looking at cannabis and looking it up, never having grown it before, there's so much information and detail, and it's overwhelming. And it made me, anyways, and I think a lot of people go through that same thing. It made me think, okay, you can't grow this plant like you can tomatoes and lettuce and whatnot in the garden. This plant needs something special, right? So you go to the hydro stores that sell all the stuff that you need to grow cannabis, right? And it's like, holy fuck, and shelves and shelves and shelves, aisles of dozens and dozens of different nutrient lines and all these claims and reasons why you need this, that, and the other thing. So I said, well, there's a reason why this is all here. So that's what I'm gonna do. But I do want to grow organic, right? So of course, you buy the organic soils, either building a super soil or just a bagged organic, potting soil type thing. And then picking out an organic nutrient line, right? There's the Fox Farms, the Earth Juice, the Biocanna, yada, 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 right? So I'm going that route. You have a little success, you don't have some success, you have some failures, right? Everything hits right, it's amazing. Something gets off, and you don't really know why. Plants growing like crap, whatever. So doing all of that, but also knowing in the back of my mind, like, man, we didn't need any of this to grow, big old tomatoes in the yard and stuff. So there's but that's suppressed, right? I'm pushing that back. I'm like, but that's not how you grow good weed. You know what I mean? So all the while being online, looking on the forums, the Overgrow, IC Mag, all of the growing discussion forums, to find out all the tips and tricks and everything I could learn. And then you find the community of organic growers, back then. And so a lot of it was amending the soil, so you start to see, okay, so we can build more into the soil, add more amendments, and that way you're relying less on the liquid fertilizers, right? So it was just a process of learning more about how soil works, diving deeper and deeper, along with observing my own success and failures with a really basic organic soil that's not very heavily amended, using bottled nutrients, and really just getting to that point where you start, just something clicks, I start to recognize, okay, the more I learn about soil and how plants grow, the more I see that this plant isn't any different, and you can grow it the same way. Not only can you, but you should, and one concept that was kind of new in the organic soil community at that time was reusing the same soil. It was really important before that. It was stressed a lot that once you veg and flower a plant in a soil, the nutrients are going to be gone, or the soil's going to be screwed up, and you're not going to want to regrow in it, right? So toss that shit out, put it in your outside garden, or throw it away, whatever. You don't want to use it again. pH is off, nutrients are off or diminished, pests coming in, that kind of thing. So seeing the concept of actually just reusing the soil, it's like, oh, fuck yeah, that makes the most sense I've ever heard so far, right? So dumping out, growing in 5-gallon buckets, dumping out the soil, ripping out the root stock, and then re-amending it, right? You're going to add back the nutrients that you took out. Okay, so we're adding, whatever dry amendments kind of thing, and then replanting in it. And that was the first time, I guess, I really saw amazing results going directly against what the standard way of growing said that you needed to do. And that was kind of like, okay, we need to start breaking all of the rules because they're fucked. The driving force behind cannabis cultivation and teaching and the standard methods used was to sell products, was to sell overpriced salt fertilizers. That was the reason. And because it was to create this, I don't know what you'd like, this special kind of like, because especially at the time, you couldn't grow into a hydro store, and they have an actual sign that says only talk about the tomatoes you're growing, right? So there's this secrecy and like this like mystical aspect of the secret thing about it, and the industry completely took advantage of that and overpriced all of the bottled nutrients, said you need this, you need that, and that got a trenchhold in growing. And I'm guessing it's probably still happens now. It's probably still kind of the standard. I know I've been growing organically and no-till, we'll get into that, for 20 years now, so for me, it's what life is. But I still think we're a fraction of the percent of growers out there. What the first plant I grew, I went to Home Depot and got a little bottle of Miracle Grow. It was blue powder. I thought I was raised to appreciate organic food and growing and gardening, but I was led to that shit, and so it was quite the journey of unlearning all the stuff I thought I had to learn to grow cannabis. So that was and it was just all along, there's a fascination with learning about soil and the plant soil relationship. To this day, it's still what gets me, and learning all the time and observing how the plants grow. I
want to lean in and just thank you for that. One of the things I think it's really important, especially for folks who are new to growing their own plants,
mm-hmm.
You're going to make mistakes, and that's how you learn, if you pay attention. Thank you. Great story,
absolutely.
Ian.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. I used to work for Ed Rosenthal, and I was his general manager.
Okay.
I used to oversee his gardens, and so when we would go to the the hydroponic stores, when I go in with him, it was impossible to not, to deny why we were there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But they would still just point us to all these, as you said, expensive salt water, which basically they were selling en masse. And then, they would joke behind our backs. They would call us, because I'm from California too here. And they call us 49ers. We were the new gold.
Okay.
The new gold rusher. So, it's like, oh, so you even got slang for us, and to oversell us, so you'll take all of our gold. Gotcha. Duly noted. So it's just, yes, I think a lot of us came from that same school, because again, the grow information out there was very limited unless you came from a growing family or a growing environment, which can be quite popular in Northern California. You know, you
Right.
really wouldn't have. So your journey is one myself I've taken, Wade's taken, and various others, as
Mhm.
we have, you know, as you so correctly stated, unlearned what we've been taught via you know, the high times and, you know, the hydroponics companies that took, you know, advantage of a time and a place of which they can no longer. And of course, we're also seeing their time and place slip away. So,
Mhm.
you know, that's you know, there's a shift that's happening, and the reason why is because you at, you know, Modesto Mountain Organic Botanicals, amongst others, you know, you're using these products and exposing people to, you know, organic living soil products, and it's showing them firsthand, you know, why, how, and helping them understand why your product seems to smell better, is nice. It's all the things that, you know, make a product on the shelf, you know, robust and, you know, rich in terpenes and scent, etc.
Mhm.
That's a whole cycle to get through to arrive at that product that many people are not aware of. So this is just a
Exactly.
one part of the journey, you know, which is soil, you know, etc. But, you know, you were talking about, you know, things that were available back then. You know, you had things like earth juice, which, you know, was
Mhm.
one of the early organics, and if you got it right, you could get it right. But if you got a bad batch, you had a bad time. So,
Right.
you know, it was, you know, it also taught growers to be more self-reliant than on the hydroponic stores as well, because we all came to the understanding that we were being sold a line of bull, but we have
Mm,
to all find it out in our own time, as we talked about our tomatoes, right? So
exactly.
we will carry on to our next question with Council Member Jones. Peggy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Jen, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Ian, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So, coming to cannabis, we often hear it called weed, and when I hear the term weed, I'm like, oh, weeds grow anywhere.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that brought to the question: is there a difference between the way you prepare the soil for the cannabis versus your ordinary garden plants?
Right. And that's a good question. In regards to growing vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, all like your food garden. And that goes back to what we were just talking about unlearning and then going back to it's the best way to grow a plant, regardless of what type it is. So towards plants we're growing for yield, you know, size and yield, harvesting fruits. No, there really isn't. I use the exact same soil. Cannabis, tomatoes, all herbs, the whole range of like anything you'd grow in a home veggie and herb garden. I prepare and use the same soil, because what it comes down to is the relationship between the organic matter in the soil and minerals, and then the microbes that deliver those to the plant. And that relationship is the same no matter what plant you're growing, right? Now you can get really specific, and you know, one might point out, well, this plant demands more of that, or this plant demands more of something else, right? And that's the beauty of a living soil, and what I describe as like a high humus, high mineral soil. It's kind of like a buffet for the plant. Just because it's there doesn't mean the plant is going to be force fed it. It's there for when it needs it, right? So you prepare a soil that has all the minerals that the plant would need. It's living, it's got all the bacteria and fungi to make it operate and to deliver those nutrients to the plant. Then it doesn't matter what plant you're growing in it, it's going to have what's available for it to grow best, you know. So that was a big part of you know, my journey in learning soil over the last, you know, 10, 12 years in particular, is taking the soil that I kind of not necessarily developed, but landed on over the years for cannabis, and be like, all right, let's grow something else, and let's put it outside and grow the summer veggies in it, and just one after the other, beautiful, healthy, high yielding plants, so I would not build soil any differently for the plant as far as that's concerned. When it comes to ornamentals, stuff you're growing not for yield, the only difference would be for me is to back down on mineral content amendments. Okay, so whatever your dry amendment fertilizer of choice in building soil, for me it's like rock dust, kelp, alfalfa. Since you're not trying to grow large fruits, flowers, right? You don't need to use that much, so I would back down on those, but otherwise it's all the same, and it's just a balance of, the other thing at play is, do you front load the soil so you don't have to worry about feeding it through the season, or do you only add a little bit of the mineral fertilizers, the rock dust, or kelp, blood meal, bone meal, feather meal, chicken meal, all the different dry amendments, whatever someone wants to use, right? All that, I just consider it's all the same. It's all just a dry amendment fertilizer. You can add a lot up front and kind of sit back and just water, or you can cut initial costs and add less, and then kind of just top dress a little bit as you go. You know what I mean? And that's but really, I mean, down to houseplants. I work with houseplants a lot too. And the biggest thing there is the structure of the soil for the type of plant it is. So were you putting in less organic matter and more aeration components, whether it's, perlite, pumice, whatever someone's using, like that kind of thing. And all the same inputs, just much less of it. So it's like different ratios of the same inputs catered to the species of plant you're growing. And I think that's really valuable information to understand, that you can grow any type of plant with the same inputs, with the same type of soil. You're just restructuring it based off of that plant's, natural background, so to speak. Yeah. The pathway to flavor and secondary plant metabolites, which are your terpenes, all the aromas, that is all the same. So the same way you're getting a more flavorful tomato or pepper or aromatic, herbs, sage, oregano, yada, 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 are the same ways that you're going to get a more terpene rich and more cannabinoid rich cannabis. You know what I mean? So all of that is developed in the soil, and it starts with the relationship between organic matter and minerals and the bacteria and fungi that are breaking that down into plant available nutrients and all of their other compounds. They create hormones, enzymes, a whole range of phytochemicals that the plants use to express their secondary metabolites, the flavors and aromas. It's pretty incredible, I think.
Michael Krauss has a follow-up question, but before that, I wanted to ask, do you oxygenate your water that you feed your plants?
No, never. No, that's ancient history.
Yeah.
Don't bother. If it makes you happy, then bubble away. That's,
Councilmember Krowitz.
If you have any fish in the water, they'll appreciate the bubbles.
There you go.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My question, go ahead. Didn't mean to.
No, I was gonna say, don't kill your fish.
Don't kill your fish. My follow-up, it's just sort of, thinking out loud or whatever you might call it, but tell me if you see in the same thing. I'm sort of seeing or feeling sort of a parallel here when you're talking about full spectrum extracts and cannabis and people using that for medicine and discovering more benefits from a full spectrum extract, even though it has the same maybe THC number or whatever, CBD number or whatever, versus just a single cannabinoid preparation. And then, you know, what you're saying about living soil, I don't know, just in my brain, it's sort of kicking out like a pattern recognition.
Yeah, exactly, because it is the relationship that the plant has with their microbes in the soil that can help develop flavor and aroma. Because we got to remember, those are all compounds that plants create to protect themselves, right? Weed doesn't smell great because it wants us to, well, that's potentially a different conversation, but you got all the herbs, lavender, rosemary, sages, mints, the list goes on and on, obviously. And the plants create these compounds to protect themselves, because when bugs want to go and eat that plant, it's too bitter, too strong a flavor, they don't like it, right? And it is microbes in the soil that live on the plant's roots. There's an area called the rhizosphere, which is just a really short, minuscule layer around plant roots that bacteria and fungi live on and exchange compounds with the plant. So in the living soil, that's in place, and there's thousands of different types of chemicals, exudates from the microbes going to the plant that specifically enhance terpene production, all of it. It's a group of compounds called secondary plant metabolites. They're secondary because they're not primary growth reasons. It's primary metabolites are what a plant needs directly to survive, you know, but secondary ones are the ones that are different from plant to plant, and that's why some plants don't have an aroma, some plants do, right? So THC, the cannabinoids, terpenes, ketones, flavonoids, all of those things are able to be enhanced by microbes in the soil. So when you put a plant in a sterile environment, hydroponic, and the only thing the plant is getting is what you're feeding it, you're taking away a laundry list of compounds and interactions that we still do not fully understand away from the plant, right? So to get the best full spectrum type of extract from the oils, the resins, you know, that a plant is making, allowing it to grow in a body of soil that it developed all of those in and has all the interactions is gonna be the best way, you know.
Councilmember Laughter has a follow-up.
Yeah, it's as much an observation, but I'm loving the depth that you're going here, Ian.
Thank you.
I'm completely agreeing with everything you've said so far. A question is, do you have formal education in this matter, or is this self-education? And that's coming from paying attention to the plants. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Self-education, really. I'm a college dropout is what it comes down to. So I don't have any formal education in science, in biology, in botany, absolutely none. But in my obsession, you can call it a journey, I call it an obsession, right? Towards learning the most I can about how to grow the best organic cannabis I could. It ultimately led me to college textbook research papers. So I've read everything I could and still have a long list of these, research papers to read. I mean, stuff about, plants and the relationship with clay minerals, secondary plant metabolites and the relationship with rhizobacteria. I mean, to take observations that I didn't understand in plants, like I'm adding this or that to the soil and the plants are growing great. I know what I did, but I don't necessarily understand what's happening, right? So diving into that world of scientific papers, research, academic papers about plant growth and soil interactions was kind of like reverse engineering my observations. And for me, it was just absolutely fascinating because with a dictionary in hand, because I don't, you have to learn about all the words they use in these, you know what I mean? Not coming from having that kind of background. But to be able to read stuff in science that explains what I see was just so fascinating, you know, and that's been, you know, I can't pretend to understand all of it. I can read something and be like, okay, I kind of get that. And I do the best I can to put 2 and 2 together. But yeah, it all led to mineral, organic matter, microbial to plant interactions, and all of the exchanges that go on there. And the amazing part is that in practice, you don't need to know any of that. It's the simplest thing in the world. It goes back to gardening with my mom, you know, making compost and mulching. You know, we don't need to know any of that. We don't any of the science. We see what works. We see, you know, it all comes from the ecosystems in place around us that have been there long before we have, right? And the seasonal process of growth and decay, you know, spring, summer, fall, when, you know, the whole process of that's what we replicate. And that's the thing that's important for me, is that's how life works on our planet, right? That's what we've been dealt with. So let's do our best to continue that and to allow that to thrive in our gardens. You know what I mean? Because you can't beat what life says, the way life says it lives. That's the process. So let's nurture that.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Camelford Lifestyle Shop, open Monday to Friday from 10 till 7 p.m. or by chance. Check out our flags, our t-shirts, plus our hats, and look of that supply of rolling papers, plus much more. We've got bongs and your favorite herbal vaporizers. Look at all the incense we have, as well as for those who collect knives, check out these knives in our collection. And while you're here, stop in to see Shay at the piercing room, where you can get poked by Shay. Daily deals, check them out. Camelford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Camelford, Ontario.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548 420.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Next up is Councilmember Michael Crowitz. Councilmember
Thanks,
Crowitz.
ATN. That's great. Yeah, it's great to be able to share a little bit of time with you, man. I really appreciate your insight, as Wade was saying. We're now getting into a new phase of our activism. We're pioneering, sort of the next level of activism. We're working beyond legalization, kind of looking, what's going to happen next after the federal government does whatever it's going to do and the president signs it into law.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at being able to get back to kind of where we came from, looking at being forced indoors to grow indoors under lights as an aberration of the drug war.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at what our friend Robert Connell Clark called the genetic ceiling that we experience with that indoor growing. Some of us remember, very few of us, I guess, at this point, remember some of the really outrageously cool, extraordinary cannabis varieties and products that were available before we were driven indoors under the lights by prohibition. Stuff from around the world, often from places that were formerly colonial subjects, places where they've gotten no benefit sharing for their genetics and stuff that they shared with us liberally to try to protect them from extinction under the drug war. And it's time for us to try to repair that damage, help those farmers, help those communities, give back and create the world that we want to be in. And part of that is this understanding of cannabis appellations, and cannabis appellations requires on this, it flows from this idea that you can get a specific product that can only come from a certain place, a geographically specific indication, as they call it, and under what they call terroir. Mm-hmm. So the question comes down to, basically, what do you see in that, and from what you know of all that, and what part of that does living soil play in the terroir and that discussion that
yeah,
world?
Absolutely. Living soil is going to allow the composition of the land you're growing on to best express itself in the plant. The different geographical difference in the end product when it comes to flavors, aromas, effects, et cetera, stems to, I guess, two things. In regards to soil, it's going to be the mineral composition, and different ranges of minerals can translate to different terpene profiles, et cetera, being more dominant versus others. And in regards to living soil, it is the ability of the soil to deliver those minerals to the plant that will determine how it's expressed. So the more living the soil is, the more microbial activity, the more established the fungal networks are. All of that is going to lead to the plant having the most potential available to it of that body of soil, right? Besides that, it's the environment. The humidity, temperatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the more we can add organic matter and care for the soil in a way that encourages a healthy, diverse microbial population, the more you're going to get out of that soil expressed into the plant. And in practice, those are the simple methods of mulching, cover crops, adding compost, or whatever the case is. But it's the organic matter, because that's the one thing that has been depleted from a lot of our soils, but it's also the mineral composition is what makes any different spot in the world unique, right? And by increasing the organic matter in those soils, you're able to then unlock more of its potential.
There you go. Thanks again for that. Next up will be Council Member Kendra Soul. Kendra.
Hello. What is the lineage of your genetics?
Oh boy, there's a number of them. So along the way, I've been, really grateful to have been gifted seeds and cuts that are older than me, and from people that I've learned from, people that I've worked with, and over the years, I started to recognize, like, boy, I've kind of collected this really neat, types of plants that they're the farthest thing from the modern hybrids we see today. So we have, really randomly how it landed in my lap, but a cut of Acapulco Gold that's around 40 years old, right? It was grown by two brothers in South San Diego, from the 70s into the 80s. And in those times, it was saving seeds of your best plant and regrowing those the next season, right? But the outdoor growing heyday of Southern California was coming to the end as you go into the 80s. So everyone was moving indoors. So at some point, I don't know when or why or what it was exactly, but at some point, cuts had to be selected, right? It was no longer necessarily growing the seeds each season. So sometime in the early 80s, a cut of this Acapulco Gold was selected and brought indoors. And indoor growing was all hydroponic. There really wasn't any organic soil being done indoors. And they had trouble bringing that plant to full flower and having a product that was what they remembered. So it was kept, but it was never in production. It landed in someone else's hands who gifted it to me kind of as an oversight, because we're talking from the 80s into the 90s into the early 2000s, right? And it was just like, it's not what it used to be. Here, you can have it. These guys, the original guys, kept it until they died. They didn't let anyone have it. It was that special to them. It was their thing, And when you go back to that time frame, it was your cut, and you're the only person that people can get bags from. It's no game. It's yours, right? You don't share that shit. So these guys were getting up there, and he called the guy I got it from. He's like, hey, you want it? You can have it now. I'm checking out. Someone needs to take it. So it was this other story I was told was kind of on his deathbed kind of thing. He got it. Years go by. It ain't growing for shit in hydroponics. He kind of started to think he pulled a fast one on him. Like, oh, that fucker, he didn't even give me the right one, kind of like a joke, like a last joke kind of thing. They were lifelong buddies, and so I started to vent. They had a dispensary. I started to vent to them in my earlier years of starting to grow a little commercial. And he liked the stuff I was bringing in. And as an afterthought, he's like, hey, why don't you try growing this one? I was like, okay, I'll grow it, 3 months later, I bring it back. And he's like, holy shit, this is it. He's like, it's been the right one all along, And because I was the first one to grow it in soil, which is what that cut knew from being grown outdoors, right? So that was really, really neat to see and to get that plant. And then the other genetics from a mentor of mine that a lot of people know as CC or Clackamas Coot. He worked with BOEL, Brotherhood of Eternal Love, and the original Thai stick and hash plant imports. And he's known for a cut called The One that he created in 1983, 1984. And it was the same deal with creating a plant that can be grown indoors, right? So the cross was of the Thai stick, the Thai plants that everyone wanted at the time, onto the frame of a hash plant, right? Because back then the indicas, the Afghan plants, weren't necessarily sold as flour. That's what you made hash with, right? But it had the structure and quicker flowering, shorter plants, quicker flowering time that could allow it to grow indoors. So that's what was going on, was crossing these long flowering sativas that you're able to grow 20 feet tall outside in Southern California to the quick flowering indicas, Afghan plants. So there was a different number of seeds of these old Thai and Afghan lines that I was gifted and blessed with, and found my own cuts and actually started to grow them a little bit commercially in my small garden in my garage, and get those out to medical shops, you know, from San Diego to Ventura. And people loved it, and I loved that they loved it, and they knew that it was different, and it had this story behind it. So I decided that I wanted to start making seeds with them, because I could only grow so much flower, but if I made seeds, I could get these genetics into a lot more people's hands, you know. So that's what I did. And the interesting thing about like the cut, and these older cuts, the Acapulco Gold too, is you have a plant, it's one expression, right? But its DNA holds a lot of genetic potential. There is a lot of other different combinations of expressions that are held within. So when you cross it, you make seeds with it, you got all these different combinations, and especially of recessive traits that can come out in the offspring. So I started to cross them and see all the different types of genotypes, all the different expressions of these really old genetics, and kind of like separate them, you know, and kind of start working lines down of each one. So that's been my focus, is to put a lot of these repopulate seeds of these old cuts, and then get the cuts into seed forms and pull out different expressions that are hidden in their genetics. And that's what I've been working on for several years now. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you again for that. Next up will be Councilmember Laughter. Wait. You have to unmute yourself, sir.
How's that?
Better.
Okay. So you've spoken about composting, Ian, and how the garden you shared with your mother was an inspiration for you. Are there what other systems, if you will, like Korean natural farming, to name one, are you using to add to the diversity of your soil? And another aspect of the question is, how differently would you approach no-till living soil indoors as versus outdoors? Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So in a word, I wouldn't, no different at all. Indoors versus outdoor, no different at all. It's a body of soil, you know, and it operates the same, right? The only restriction is size and adjusting expectations a little bit to the size of the body of soil, the size of your bed or your pot. So no-till gardening, no-till is where my focus has been, you know, within living soil. And that's, so when you build a potting soil, or you know, whether it's in a bed indoors, or in your garden, it's about caring for that body of soil. So it ends up being less about growing a plant than it is to caring for a body of soil. So you use compost, you add minerals. For me, it's rock dust or any other amendments that, you know, crustacean meal, crab meal, bone meal, blood meal, kelp, alfalfa, all the list goes on and on, right? Those are your fertilizers, right? And then how that soil matures over time, we're mimicking how nature works, right? So so as far as, you know, what other systems, you know, let's address that. What other systems are being used? Mulch, right? Cover crops and companion planting. Those would be the three extensions of living soil that I would say kind of round out the whole system, right? Cover crops, big thing with that you're going to hear is legumes, clovers, alfalfas, and the term nitrogen fixing. right? The air is composed of something like 72% nitrogen. There's no reason we should need to add outside nitrogen fertilizer when it can be pulled directly from the air. That's kind of the goal, is to have a system in place where all of your nitrogen needs are free, right? So through cover cropping with legumes or companion planting, because legumes, it's peas, it's beans, you know, lupins. I mean, once you start getting into it, there's a lot of plants that are nitrogen fixing. And what that means is there's bacteria called rhizobium that live in those types of plants' roots that are able to take in that atmospheric nitrogen and deposit it in the root, in the root nodules, you know. So you're adding an important source of fertilizer from growing legumes, whether it's large cover crops or like interplanting. You know, if you have rows or however it works, and you're growing permanent rows of clovers or alfalfa in between, kind of thing. And then that's coupled with interactions in the rhizosphere, in the root zone, because soil is not living without the microbes in the soil, and the microbes in the soil are not stimulated to live without roots to interact with, right? The more roots we have in a soil, the more of those bacteria and fungi and the diversity of them that we're going to have. A big concept, and this goes back to kind of like unlearning what we learned kind of thing, is competition in the soil. Now, there are, of course, times where that exists, but the statement of just having other, like, I'm not going to grow other plants with my cannabis because they're going to steal nutrients. Like, that statement needs to go away, right? What is a reality is the size of the plant, right? So don't grow an 8-foot trailing cherry tomato in with a 2-foot cannabis plant, because it creates dominance, right? You want to make sure your main crop you're growing is the dominant plant in that body of soil. That allows it to kind of be the orchestrator, so to speak. All the other plants are working for it, right? So that's the one thing to watch out for, is which plant becomes the dominant plant. It's like a hierarchy, right? So in growing cannabis, it's our large plant, it's our tree, right? And then you can have your mid layer and then your bottom layer, you know, trees, shrubs, ground covers. So that's kind of like the main crop, companion plants, and then cover crop or living mulch. Okay. And then same thing, like I touched a little bit earlier on interactions of microbes towards cannabis and enhancing terpenes, right? So there's a whole group of they're called PGRPs, plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, and they're highly related to terpene production, you know, to flavors, aromas in plants. So when you are growing different types of aromatic plants together that naturally create relationships with microbes that enhance flavor and aroma, you're going to have a better consortium and availability of those types of microbes altogether, right? So microbial root stimulation is important. That comes from the cover crops to companion plants and to your main crop, to your cannabis. And a large part of nutrients going forward long-term in a no-till system is just mulching. Everything that we don't consume goes right back onto the top as mulch. And there are loads of nutrients in the stems, the leaves, and the roots of plants that the microbes will decompose, turn into organic matter, and become available to the plant immediately. So the longer you grow plants in the same body of soil, the richer it gets, the less outside inputs you need, the more living it becomes, the more bacteria and fungi are in the soil, right? And their ability to deliver nutrients to the plant becomes more efficient, right? So they're able to utilize nutrients and compounds more efficiently. So it's two ways that your fertilizer needs go down, right? One, because you're just adding more back to it, but two, because your populations of microbes are developing to work more efficiently and that the plants need less. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Councilmember Laughter has a follow-up.
Actually, Nate raised his hand before me, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to slightly change the subject. So let's stay with Nate.
Nate, then wait.
It's a real quick question. What was the max amount of cannabis growth cycles you get out of a pot?
Infinite. I've done 40 myself, right? Meaning in the same body of soil without disturbing it. I've grown a plant from seed to harvest. Let's say that's 3 to 4 month time frame. That includes veg and flower, 40 times continuously in the same body of soil. And by the time, and that's over a 10-year period. So it's an average 10 to 12 years. So an average of 3 to 4 harvests a year, indoors, in 20-gallon, 45-gallon, 60 and 100-gallon pots, right? And I would, towards the end, I went something ridiculous like 12 cycles, 12 harvests without adding anything, nothing. That's how rich and efficient the soil becomes. And once, like, you don't need to grow a plant 1,000 times in it to know that you can, because you start to understand and see the process and how it works. It can go on indefinitely. It goes back to how life works on this planet, the soil that has been in place for millions of years, and we're just doing our best to replicate that. And as long as we're caring for it in that way, it's really simple, then it will never stop. It will absolutely never stop functioning in the way it needs to grow amazing plants. The only thing that we pay attention to ultimately is replacing what we take out. You know, that's an obvious. The only thing we're taking out, let's say if you're strictly growing for cannabis flower, are the flowers themselves, right? So you think you have a massive plant, you have a massive root system, stem structure, and all these leaves, right? And that's 99% of the plant, and you're only taking the flowers. So all of those minerals, all of those nutrients fall back and go back into the soil. So we're just replacing a little bit, and it's super simple. I've found, like, it's what I offer with my business: rock dust, kelp, alfalfa. You don't need much. You don't need a lot of different variety, because all those break down to the same minerals. So you just add a little bit back each time, or every few times. You know, it's up to case-by-case basis, and you can go on forever because it's what we see around us. Yeah.
Councilmember Laughter.
Thank you, Jen. And Ian, I realized a little while ago, one of the things that I thought was really important, you've mentioned just briefly in passing, water. Yeah. And particularly the pH of water. And is your source of water treated, quote unquote, with something like chloramine or chlorine, as versus coming from a well that is clean, and the effects of that on living soil? Yeah, I bet you got something to say about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've grown in places where it was, chlorinated tap water of questionable quality, to in the mountains where my business started. That's why it's called Mountain Organics. That was pretty darn good water. And then now I'm on unfiltered well water. And the nature of living soil is, as you might guess, is that it adjusts the chemistry, the pH of itself naturally, all on its own. So, and that fluctuates. You might see a chart, at some point, if you're growing with a little bit of science towards it, you'll see a chart of what minerals, what nutrients are available at what pH. So and kind of go for an average of somewhere between 6 to 7 kind of thing, right? Because there's some that are available from like 3 to 5.5 or whatever, and others that are available from 5 to 8. So the happy medium is like, adjusting your solution or your water to somewhere around 7, right? And that's all great and fine and dandy, and that is the science, and that is required for plants to uptake these nutrients. But the beauty of it is that soil's doing it for us, right? The exudates exchanged from microbes and the plant do all of that for us, and there's so much going on that is so complicated yet simple, because it's the more living the soil is. All of the stuff that we just talked about is all about allowing the plant to utilize unuptake nutrients more efficiently. So all of those adjustments are constantly happening. You can test the pH of your soil at different times of the day or week or point in the plant's life cycle, and it'd be different, right? And then that might lead someone to want to be like, well, I need to do this or that. It's always going to be a little bit different, and that's the soil's doing it for us, right? And the thing about chlorine and chloramine, that's pretty neat, and soil acts as a filter. Okay, the humic content, the humic and fulvic content in a soil acts as a filter. And the chlorine and chloramine thing specifically, a lot of municipalities are now switched to chloramine, which is bonded to another compound because see, chlorine is a gas, right? That's the first thing that people need to understand about the element chlorine. That's why you smell it. That's why you smell it in a swimming pool, right? Is because it's constantly leaving the water. It doesn't want to be in the liquid. It wants to go back to gas. So the reality is that chlorine in any body of water, it won't even get 2 inches into the soil before it off gases. So chlorine is an absolute non-issue, period, right? Chloramine is bonded, I believe, to ammonia, right? And the microbes in a soil break that bond, right? So the chlorine is released to the air, and the ammonia is breaking down to ammonium nitrate, which is a nitrogen, right? So the bond is broken, the chlorine is gone, there's no harm, no foul. Chlorine and chloramine itself should not even be a concern for anyone other than hydro stores wanting to sell you reverse osmosis units. I think that been a huge driving force in making people afraid of chlorine to be forced to buy reverse osmosis units. One of the best experiences I had in growing was stop using a reverse osmosis unit and start using my tap water, because all of a sudden my plants started to get all these range of minerals that were missing. It went from 0 ppm water to 200, 300, 400 ppm water. And at that time, I saw a whole range of problems disappear. So that's my shtick on that.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful and beneficial. Next up is Councilmember Peggy Jones.
All right. Our last question is, what does cannabis cultivation look like to you after the drug war is over?
So, I mean, my area of study has been the plant and soil, so I don't think my opinion really matters on that. But, it comes down to any industry, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it comes down to it being a commodity. And we all know what happens to a highly profitable commodity in the system that in place right now. So it does 2 things. One, it allows a lot of people the ability, and we're seeing that right now, to grow the plant and offer a product that is mediocre at best, and there's nothing else behind it other than it being a commodity. But it also allows a lot of innovation and diversity, and that's what I would love to see take place, and I think we are seeing that. Small batch, small farms, small growers, and just having that extra care put into cultivation and the wide range of plant expressions that can come out of it. It's I think it's the nature of the beast. There's gonna be the profitizing it, and then there's going to be the maybe, like, I don't know, the underdog kind of rise of some really cool stuff going on, and hopefully we can keep that going on the forefront.
Peggy has a follow-up.
Yes, you mentioned you've done both living soil and you've done hydroponics in the past. Is that correct?
So no, I haven't done hydroponics
Okay.
like directly myself. No. When I started growing, I knew I wanted to grow in soil and as naturally as possible. So I gravitated towards the organic nutrients available, and some of them weren't organic at all. They're by companies that sell both organic and non-organic, and you're sold this like, you need this, and you look at the bottle, phosphoric acid, ammonium nitrate, yada yada yada, and you're like, all right, I guess the plant need, and then you just realize it's just overpriced salts. So
All right, well, thank you for this, Ian. Do you have anything coming up, or something, a product that you're more than welcome to plug anything that you have going on? I know that you are with, of course, Mountain Organics Botanicals. But
yeah, thank you. So I have two sides of my business. My passion for growing has grown into two businesses. And so you can find me at mountainoorganics.net. That's where I offer all of my gardening products. So we have stuff from cover crop seeds to soil amendments, the living soil pots, and then my line of botanicals for both foliar spray and soil drench. That's a whole another topic that we didn't get into, but I extract botanicals to be able to feed back to the plant that are natural plant growth hormones, and then also the same compounds to act as a natural pesticide, right? So check those out on my website. There's a line of botanical tonics that are more veered towards plant health and growth stimulants, and then leaf shine, which are kind of like an enhanced version of like a neem oil that includes a lot of cool compounds to encourage plant health at the same time, as well as essential oils, things like that to naturally take care of pests. And the other side of the business are the cannabis genetics, the seeds. Those are all available on mobseeds.com, mobseeds.com. Our packs are 15 seeds, all regular. On my Instagram at Mountain Organics. In the story highlights, you'll see tons of pictures and information of everything, and the description's also on the site. And I wanted to offer, just for the viewers here, buy one get one on the seed packs. So I would say email me. There's an email on that site. And just mention, like, hey, I saw you on the talk there, and then I'll give you an extra pack of seeds for everyone you order. And yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for letting me chat, and it's been great.
Well, thank you absolutely very much. I would like to thank our guest Ian Ardoin, and our regular members Michael Crowitz, Peggy Jones, Nate Landau, Wade Laughter, and Kendra Soul, and myself, Etienne Fontaine. Thank you very much for a very enlightening conversation, Ian. And this has been V.A.C Roundtable number 69, Ian Ardoin. So Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.